Good afternoon. It's a delight to see all of you here. I'm taking a slightly different tack on this topic. And I will preface my remarks by telling you what I tell my students. I teach accounting, but the way that I sort of explain whenever I make a screw up, because I'm not 100% precise with numbers, I said my mother and my paternal grandmother were the accountants in the family, and they both worked at it for years. I'm more of a poet-philosopher trapped inside an accountant's body, so I'm coming at it from that perspective today. So, overview of what I'm going to talk about. First off, what's the problem we're talking about today? What is the essence of the issue? Secondly, I'll make some brief remarks on motivation, which I think is actually the big question that underlies all this. How do we approach what it is that we do? And then a few hopefully useful suggestions. The way that I think about this is that I don't really have any great pearls of wisdom to pass to you. What I'm going to do instead is to sort of talk about my general view of life that has come about because of circumstances that I had to face, mostly personal, but they were connected to my professional sort of identity. So I think what we're talking about today is what kind of mental perspective is most conducive for a junior young scholar starting out their academic life, and how do they then use that to deal with the kind of challenges that invariably arise for all of us. And so I find it interesting to hear everybody else's story, because everybody has problems of not getting things the way that you want them to be. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. So what can I add to today's discussion? Probably not very much. What I'm going to try to do is give you some perspective that I've picked up over a number of years, and that goes back to the mid-1980s. And here's my background. I have a PhD from the University of Chicago. It's basically in economics, like everybody in the business school there. In those days, I'm in heart an economist. And I'll talk about a set of issues that arose for me in the late 1980s. And they were health-driven, right? So I had a diagnosis of something that could have turned out to be really bad, or something that could have been really good. As it turned out, I have the best-case scenario, that nobody can tell that I have a problem, because it's not really a problem, right? It never really surfaces. So I had this advantage, right? I got the wake-up call, but I also got to sleep late, right? And so what that means is that, everybody has experiences in their life where they have to step back and say, what's this all about? What is it we're doing here? And how do I sort of deal with that most effectively? And for me, I was going through a period of time where there was a lot of frustration, stagnation, and stuff like that, and I felt like I wanted to walk away from academia. So the result of that was that I spent a couple of years thinking pretty hard about the kind of life that I wanted to live, and went through all the machinations that you expect to be going along with that. My main conclusion from that was that the motivation that I had to do this work had to come from inside, right? I could find people that were helpful to me, that I could talk to. The idea of having mentors and colleagues and stuff like that, that's really, really good advice. But at the end of the day, it's got to come from inside. It's got to be something that drives me to do this. And so I think Richard Fineman had it right when he said, you have no responsibility to live up to what other people think you ought to accomplish. And what that means is that was a period in his life, he was very young. He had just entered academia after working on the Los Alamos atomic bomb project. He was a physicist. And he got this incredible offer to go to Princeton and be part of their Institute for Advanced Study, right? And he was just overwhelmed by it. And he was going through a period of his life where he was blocked. He wasn't getting things done, and he couldn't understand why he was getting this great offer, right? And then it clicked to him. He had no responsibility to be able to do what the other people thought that he had to do. It was solely up to him to define what that was. And so a couple years ago, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues over in the business school, who's a very thoughtful person. I talk to her frequently. And she said something like, "You don't really care what other people think of you," right? And I said, yes and no. I do care what other people think of me. It's just that I don't necessarily think about the kinds of things that I used to think about 10 or 15 years ago. And so what I mean by that is that I care whether other people think that I'm a nice person who treats other people with dignity and respect. I think that's important, right? I want people to think that I'm thoughtful, that I don't give pat answers, that I actually consider what it is that they say to me. I'm a good listener. I'm intelligent, I think, I hope. I'm generous and caring. And I'm funny. So on my good days, I'm all of those things, but the vast majority of days, I'm actually none of those things. But those are the things that are aspirations. So the $64,000 question on the no side is, I don't really care what other people think about the kinds of issues that I work on, the kinds of questions that I devote my life to. I do care if they offer me suggestions for making it better. I listen very carefully to those. Like everybody here, I've had my share of travails with referees and stuff like that, and I've come to the conclusion my best way to deal with that is to try to have an out-of-body experience with it from the standpoint of saying, what is it that's causing the referee to make this comment about the work that I've submitted, and what's the most effective way to actually address the problem? And it may not necessarily be what the referee tells you to do, because they don't have the familiarity that you do with the project. But in other words, try to figure out why it is that you care about what other people think of you. Use that constructively, but don't let it derail you. And I've had the sense that this has sort of gone through lots of the comments here. At some point in time, you have to sort of step back and say, I'm going to just go for this. And you know, if it's a project that's ambitious and somebody doesn't like it, think, well, they're probably wrong, but I want to figure out why they're saying the things they're saying. So, my suggestions: focus on the work. That's where the satisfaction is. You won't get any great satisfaction out of networking with people at annual meetings, although that's necessary, and that's a good thing that you do that. That's not really where the satisfaction lies. Getting awards, likewise, is a really good thing, and that in some regards, that's a reflection of doing the right things, but that's not what it's about either. It's in the work itself, the grappling with the ideas and that sort of stuff. Take some risks. The optimal number of mistakes is a positive number, not zero. Victory is not fulfillment, and you can be successful in life and do lots of good things, and those are important things to do, but that's not the same as being fulfilled and happy and content with your life. And so a quote that I would cite there is by John Wooden, who was the most successful, I shouldn't say that, in my view, the best basketball coach that ever lived. And he said, I never talked about winning. It was about making sure that things were done the right way, that people were trying to be the best that they could be, even if they had less ability than somebody else. That's the thing that's important. Be different. The idea is if somebody is sort of threatened by the fact that you don't look the same or you don't think the same as somebody else, don't worry about that. I've never seen anybody in my life who fell in love with someone else who they thought was completely average on all possible dimensions. You got to be different. And so the idea is to really figure out what is it on the upside of what you're doing that you can really sort of push on. And then have some fun. There are essentially three institutions in life for people like us: mental institutions, prisons, and universities. Just thank God that you found yourself in the best of those three, and enjoy it. Take your work seriously, try to do well, get connected with good people that'll push you and sort of help you do your better work, but don't, at the end of the day, take it to heart like you're not a good person because you're getting this bad comments. I sense that that's a commonality in all of these talks this morning. And so, I made it through without talking about career success or failure once. And those are all important things to talk about, but that's not really what it is about. It's sort of how you figure out how you're going to live your life to be contented, and if you do that, you'll end up being successful at the end of the day. And there's massive amounts of good constructive suggestions that have been made here this morning. And so with that, I'll say thank you, and I appreciate being invited.